Welcome back on the Leaders Who Care 146th episode. I have the privilege today to welcome one of the biggest names in neurodiversity. Get to the bottom of it, of number of dilemmas, questions, and some of them may be provocative, but it's all for the benefit of everyone to understand it. And welcome, Theo. I really have the pleasure to have you today. Theo is the founder of Neurodiversity at Work and co-author of award-winning book Neurodiversity at Work, podcast host of Neurodiversity, and also a true trailblazer in the field through his philosophy of neurodiversity by design. And he challenges companies to take intentional steps to build work environments that empower neurodiversity individuals, from IBM, EY to Microsoft, some of the world's most successful companies, providing his vision, right, embracing neurodivergent talents as a strategic advantage. So, Theo, welcome on the Leaders Who Care.
Thank you. Real pleasure to be here and excited to kind of deal with some of these provocative, challenging, difficult questions that people are often scared to ask. And I think that one of the biggest challenges we have is exactly that a lot of the most difficult, challenging questions don't get asked and therefore they don't get resolved. And people just own them in their heads. We need to kind of really shift the thinking of leaders within organizations to support them of making better decisions around this topic.
Well, Theo, you've been recognized for your work across number of stages, and you've helped a lot of companies. But maybe a little bit of context of why. Why do you do what you do for the audience before we actually get into the more, before we trash out the topic of neurodiversity in much more details and really depthness?
Yeah. So I guess to tackle one of the challenging areas of this is I've been skeptical too, right? I'm from a recruitment and HR background. I've been in all different types of organizations and environments. I've worked and managed teams. I've made poor decisions in my life. And when I came across the topic of neurodiversity, what it did is it explained some things about my life that I didn't understand. It woke me up. And it is not too late for anybody to be awoken from past experiences where they may have made poor decisions or they may have thought a particular thing, and that can be challenged and transformed. So I now try and take that message to the rest of the world, right? And many people get awoken for many different topics. For me, it was the reality that I identified as autistic, dyslexic, and ADHD once I understood what those terms were, what they meant, how they potentially impacted me and my family, and then what I could do about them. I went on to write the book, as you mentioned, Neurodiversity at Work Neurodiversity at Work, that went on to win Business Book of the Year award, because I wanted to share that message with other leaders within the talent space, within the HR space, with leaders of organizations. I wanted them to understand this incredible topic and information that I had learned. So now I make it my daily activities, my hourly activities, to kind of inform and transform the world of work around the topic of neurodiversity and neuro-inclusion.
Wonderful, Theo. That's really really have seen the impact that has on people's lives. So, however, as you know, there's a lot of people that don't understand this, and today the purpose of this episode, just to set the context, is I'll step into a role of a skeptical CEO that really isn't convinced about the value of hiring neurodivergent talents. So, as much as I believe in in really the impact and the importance of neurodiversity, I will sacrifice myself to be in that position so that we can really challenge you and be in the hot seat, facing some tough, controversial questions that many leaders might be hesitant to ask out loud. So we'll dive into the real world scenarios and unpack some challenges and uncover practical strategies that can help make informed decisions, both for the employee but also for the leaders. And it's about giving the tools and perspective to navigate complex issues. So if you're ready, let's get into it.
I'm ready, Marian. You bring that skeptical CEO to me. I'm born ready now for this.
Yeah, you bet. You better. He'll be a tough one. Theo, our company is already performing well. Why should we invest time and resources in neurodiversity? What's really the real return on investment here?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what? Even though these questions will challenge, there's often there's some real connection to these questions. There's some past trauma to these questions. There's some fear, right? That a CEO as an organization that is performing well, the last thing they want to do is upset the apple cart. But let me challenge this, right? Organizations have shown that neurodivergent talent bring unique problem solving approaches, increase innovation, and really specialized skills that directly boost competitive advantage, right? So actually, a lot of people will know that now from a lot of the DEI insights and research. So maybe I don't have to push that element too big, that neurodivergent talent are really innovative and can perform really well, because what you're saying is we're already doing well. Now, what I would challenge is that the economy is volatile. The world is currently volatile, right? Marketplaces are volatile. They're adapting and changing all the time. And if you are a very successful organization and you are growing, that is exactly why you need to get ahead of the game on this. And let me tell you why. Because when you go through growth, transformation, at the speed at which we're experiencing now, economically, globally, technological innovation, we will experience changes in workforce structures, right? So that may be that we decrease the size of the workforce because we optimize through AI and technology. It may be that we don't decrease, but we redistribute expertise across the organization, right, to account for the new innovations in technology, right? What I'm saying is your company is going to shift at a rapid pace. That means leaders will change, functions will change, teams will change. And if you don't think about the impact that that's going to have neurologically on your employees, you're going to hit a brick wall. You're going to hit a problem. Because individuals who are performing well yesterday, all of a sudden they have a new manager. Their past manager accounted for some of their quirks, if you want to call them that, or their differences or the nuances. They understood them. They'd maybe worked with them for 5 years. They were more flexible and more agile to this individual's needs. They'd made, forget about reasonable adjustments, they'd optimized adjustments to account for increased performance with this individual. Now, but all of a sudden, this individual has a different team. They have a different focus area that they're going to work in. They have different systems, structures, processes. If you've not thought about those changes, what you're going to find is that a disproportionate amount of your workforce overnight hit a brick wall and struggle. And that's a problem, especially if you're talking about organizations in the hundreds or in the thousands. We see that those organizations go through such significant change that those barriers can literally have a detrimental negative impact on the performance of that organization. So very simply put, just because you're performing exceptionally well today doesn't mean that tomorrow your workforce will significantly struggle. I'd actually say you are more likely to find yourself in that position because you'll more rapidly change systems, processes, people, functions, etc., to account for that significant growth.
But what would it cost you? If we're doing those, what adjustments are we talking about? Can you give some examples? What organization that is not really very familiar with neurodiversity at work? What reasonable adjustments you are referring to? Can you give some examples, cases?
Yeah, I mean, literally, the cost of a reasonable adjustment in the UK based on Gov data is under £100. It's much less than £100 per person for a reasonable adjustment. Those reasonable adjustments can be a wide variety of things. Think about your whole journey. So if it's in the recruitment process, it might be providing interview questions up front. And people go, providing the data, the insight to an interview up front. Why would we do that? Well, you would do it because those who need it, who benefit from it, will be able to perform much better at displaying to you what they can do, right? And what is an interview process other than being able to understand somebody's capability to do a job? That's what we want to do. Now, some
But they
people are able to
could lie. They could say, "I know the question," and I could, yeah. Now I know. I'm gonna kind of pretend that I can do it.
Absolutely. So we need to mitigate some of the risks, right? But we know. So let's take neurodivergence and neurodiversity to one side a minute. We know there's evidence and research to suggest to us this year in the UK, students, young people going into the workplace, approximately 80% of them will use generative AI, right, to apply for jobs. Whether that's to apply through the application process, whether that's to answer questions in the interview process, to what scale they use it, will depend on the individual, I guess, and the risk they're willing to take. But we know candidates are already doing this. So the risk from that perspective is already there that individuals will be using generative AI to complete applications, right? So applicants are already gathering more data and insight into organizations, into the answers and everything else than they ever had before. So what we need to think about is, okay, we accept that as a reality. What are we going to do to diversify the way that we are able to identify skills and capabilities to do a job? And in the reality, what we know is that in most cases, some can argue in certain cases not, but in most cases, providing the questions up front to anybody, you don't have to segment it just to those who say, hey, I'm dyslexic and I struggle with reading and processing information, or I'm ADHD. Can I have the questions? No. Would you benefit? Do you want to have them? Or we'll just give them to all candidates and the candidate can choose whether they utilize them or not. So the reality is, those individuals who require it, use it, benefit from it. Those who don't need it, don't use them. That is fine. It levels the playing field rather than changes the playing field to benefit a group of people. Most of those questions, right, we just need to know that individual's experience, skills and capability to do the job. If we can't measure that effectively in the interview process because we're sharing the questions or not sharing the questions, that is ridiculous. And the reason why it's ridiculous is because some of us really struggle with taking the question in the moment and going back in time to find the where we actually did it and to display that. The way that my brain works, I really struggle with that, which means what I'm going to do, Marian, is probably lie, or I'm just going to give whatever idea, or I'm going to pull the worst thing that comes to mind first. And therefore, you're not really heeding my skill and capability. What you're heeding is the first thing I can bring to my mind to say how I can do something. Now, somebody else who's got an incredible memory, right? They may be able to capture something that's, all right, but they can remember it and they can describe it, and therefore they get the job. They're not necessarily the best person for the job. They have the best ability to remember in that second the thing that they did that relates to that question. From my perspective, and from a lot of people, that's a really poor way to assess individuals. And just to come on to the reasonable adjustment piece, reasonable adjustments can exist all across organizations. So let's think about an adjustment as an adaptation for performance, right? An adaptation to increase performance and productivity. So if I'm left-handed and I'm using a right-handed pair of scissors, that is decreasing my productivity and my ability to do the job of cutting through cloth that I need to then seam, right? To create designer clothes to sell on, right? You give that person a left-handed pair of scissors for left hand, I've just increased optimization, performance, the precision, right? And all I did was give them a very simple adaptation. The problem we have with cognitive barriers is that often we struggle to see them. So we need to work a little bit harder to get to what some of those barriers may be. And sometimes we need to get external support in to help us see what some of those barriers are. So the individual there may not always know themselves, and the manager or the team may not know. So that's where some increased support, training, development, external coaching, guidance, all of those things can play a really key role upskilling the team and supporting the individual to perform at their optimum.
How would you justify this expense, like for the short term, really, that impacts the short term profit versus the long term uh,
Yeah. So
investment?
yeah. So, and I get it, right? Because that's a lot of organizations will be going, we're under a lot of pressure. The world's volatile, markets are volatile. Why are we going to want to think now long term when we just need to survive,
Mm.
or we just need to, get the product out there, or whatever it is? The reality is, whether you're a shareholder, whether you're an investor, whether you're a private equity firm, we know the challenge is now is money is tight, right? Money is not available in the way, shape, or form it was previously, where investment houses or shareholders could consider front loading investment on the basis that they would see a return further down the road. So money is no longer the solution to be able to achieve that. We can't go, we'll hire 50 more salespeople, and we've barely got the money to do it, but we'll take the loan, we'll front load it with all these salespeople because they'll drive more sales, and then we'll deliver more products, and poof, we'll resolve it in 5 years' time. Most people who are taking money, investing money, are saying, no, we actually need more from less. And often what they mean by more from less is more from the people, the systems, the processes. So if we think about that in terms of neurodivergent talent, what you've got at the moment from all the data and analysis that we have working with organizations, and the broader data and insights that have come out of surveys and stuff in the UK and globally, is that neurodivergent talent in companies today are facing significant barriers that are making the work difficult. It's making it difficult for them to do the job that they have real fantastic skills at doing. And there's a wide variety of reasons why that may be the case. But if you're thinking about short-term value and success, actually, what better way than to optimize your current workplace's practices to enable your current workforce to do more, who actually often have real specialist skills in niche areas that they could smash stuff out of the park if you could just release the handcuffs, the neurological
Mm.
handcuffs on them. And that comes back to the point I was saying before about, we put a lid on it. We don't want to think about it. We say it's going to cause us all these problems. The data I have shows us these problems already exist. You just don't want to lift the lid on it. We worked with a leading healthcare organization in Europe, and we found from their UK workforce that 30% of them were facing neurological barriers in the workplace today, and they weren't talking about it. 40% were impacted through family members that they were responsible for, who may be autistic, dyslexic, ADHD, for example, who were facing barriers within education, within the community. And those barriers were making it difficult for those parents, for example, grandparents, to be able to fully commit their attention to their workplace because of the distractions that existed outside of work. When we talk about those types of figures in workplace today, right, if you want to put your hand over your eyes and pretend like it's not happening, then that's fine. But what you're going to see is an increase in challenges around mental health and well-being, a decrease in performance and productivity, challenges with communication within teams, issues with legal cases. Let's be honest, there will be more legal cases because people better understand the barriers that they're now facing that they didn't before. And in fairness, and rightly so, they're going, I'm not accepting it. I'm not accepting that you treat me in this poor way without first giving me the chance to show that I can still deliver, right? Because most of us, in all honesty, we want to be respected for the way that we do our work. We want to be respected for the skills that we have, the abilities. But when we're disabled within the environment, when we're disabled by being locked out of the workplace, when we're disabled by systems, processes, and the way that people think of us that is not accurate, based on inaccuracies in the media and PR and what have you, around the negativity around some of these topics. We need to deal with those. And what an opportunity for an organization to show to their shareholders, to show to their investors, actually, there's low-hanging fruit here where we can make quick wins, but it will also have a longer-term positive impact on profitability as well. I think that's, that should be an easy thing to convince the shareholders of.
Yeah, you're very convincing. But how can I ensure that hiring neurodiverse employees won't create productivity issue or disrupt my team's dynamics?
So first of all, you already have neurodivergent talent in your organizations, like I just said. Disproportionately, you will have. If you're not thinking about it, then you're just hiding away future challenges and potential problems, right? And you're thinking, well, these teams over here perform quite well, we'll just let them get on. Back to my point earlier around eventually you will hit a brick wall. Eventually you will hit a bump. And in the moment that you hit that brick wall, it's really hard to deal with it. So thinking about maybe an employee resource group. Do you have an employee resource group that specifically focuses on neurodiversity or neuroinclusion within your organization? Are you funding that? Are you supporting that? Are you allowing the safe space for employees to have those conversations and discussions so that they can bring eventually, not immediately, but eventually bring some of the insights, some of the learnings, some of the expertise that's coming from within that community that is in your organization, experiencing your systems, your processes, your ways of working, the stuff you do incredibly well. They can bring those insights back into the teams. So that optimizes the team. That increases the performance of the team. And you want to know why? Because most individuals want to have a why within their work, right? And they're missing that, a lot of individuals. So when you say to somebody who's dyslexic, for example, and they've not really wanted to mention it before because culturally it might not be acceptable, they might not be able to talk about it at home, which I've come across many a time in their community. It's still deemed something negative, and there's something wrong with you, and so you don't feel comfortable discussing it. But the minute you have this employee resource group where you can open up and discuss it, all of a sudden you can start to feel more confident, more enabled. You can see other people who talk about their strengths and their abilities and how they attribute that to their work, their innovation, their ideas. All of a sudden you see those concepts coming back into the team. And that instills an energy, a positive energy in the team where they can start to see the strengths, but also they can see how you attribute some of the strengths within that cognitive trait or behavior into the work that you do. And that might literally be in terms of design of technology. An example of where I've seen this is ASML. The reality is for ASML, they are innovators in a semiconductor industry. So if we think of NVIDIA, we think of electrical vehicles, we think of space exploration, we think of microchips that go into mobile technology, pretty much any innovation in technology. And we think about NVIDIA, organizations supporting NVIDIA like ASML are the real innovators in how you get incredible amounts of data and insight into small microchips, right? Those organizations have already recognized that they're neurodivergent, that their teams are disproportionately neurodivergent, and they've come to awaken to the fact the reason why their technology is a game changer and nobody can touch it is because they have built an organization that almost by accident, in some respects, I guess more than by design, has become very neurodivergent. You then ask, well, what were the mechanisms to become that organization? How did they get there? Well, when you give opportunities to work in innovation, to work in design, to work in building something that challenges the status quo, we can see in history some of the biggest innovators in technology, in art, in science, in music have been neurodivergent. Even those who challenge the status quo in terms of climate change, like Greta Thunberg, these are neurodivergent individuals. So why wouldn't those individuals make incredible innovators within organizations if we make the adaptations and changes? So my answer to you is, if you want to be on the forefront of design, of innovation, if you want to push the boundaries in terms of what your organization is doing, if you want to be unique, diverse, then yeah, you're going to have to think about that some more. Just like, a product is not going to be the most innovative product unless you really give it some attention, some focus, and get the best people working on it. It takes extra effort, work, and you need to think outside of that box that so many others are stuck in. So, yeah, do you want to take that time to really create something incredible, or do you want to stay as you are and not overcome some of those initial barriers that will allow you to, go off into space in your incredible, innovative rocket?
Thank you, Theo. Yeah, I still have some questions here. That's obviously. Thank you for the arguments and the data here. However, it's still, we know that we understand that neurodiverse employees. How do we handle them? That who struggle with communication and collaboration. My team and clients may feel uncomfortable, and wouldn't this create more problems than it solves? Or do you give them a different roles? I mean, just what would be your practical advice? So you say, first of all, find out, open up new employee resource group, find out that you already have a neurodiverse talent, so be proactive rather than reactive. But yeah, how do we handle those communications and internal difficult cases or client cases that may come up because they may not communicate in the same way as others?
Yeah, well, we all communicate differently, right? And there's a number of factors that come into play, whether it's, if we're working in the UK, for example, is English our first language? There's an immediate communication barrier, right? So we already understand that language communication is broad and complex and nuanced on a number of factors. Gender comes into that, ethnicity, cultural identity, all of those can play a challenge in terms of ensuring that we are communicating effectively. Some of us may be very confident and verbose, and others may be much more reserved. And so it's not like this doesn't exist already, and we've not already had these conversations. We just then decide that a particular individual is a problem because they don't want to communicate in an expected way. So we need to get better at this. My challenge to you would be, why do they feel that way? Why do they feel awkward? Where is the problem? How has it manifested itself? What is the manager doing about it? What support have you given to that individual to be able to deal with some of these barriers and challenges? How are they dealing with it? Often what we find is because of the fear, right? Because of the fear around the difference, because of what people have heard in the media, they make assumptions. And I find this all the time, Marian. I find that if you show something that is really different, often individuals will immediately react with fear, right? And they used it almost like in the medical space, health and social care space. And I know this through the parental experience. They will use the word catastrophizing, right? That if a parent is worried about their child, they might catastrophize to the worst possible outcome, the worst fear because of what they've read. We do this as leaders, right? Leaders do this for organizations. And I'd say actually often maybe middle management or lower senior management, depending on how you want to define it, size of organizations, will do this, right? They're fearful of this situation of somebody who's autistic because what have they read, what they've heard, what they've seen, they watched a film, and therefore they catastrophize. I had a senior leader, TA leader, come up to me and say, somebody's asked if they can bring their mum in to the interview online, and he's like, what am I supposed to do with that? How can they bring their mum to the interview? And I said, well, why can't they? And so what I was trying to do with this, Marian, is understand like the catastrophizing element. What is it you're really scared of? And they were like, well, the mum can't answer the questions for them. I'm like, great, okay, let's get that point down. Mum can't answer questions, okay? If the mum comes, you've got to tell her she can't answer the questions for him, okay? So we're getting some criteria around what you can and can't do. That's fine. Well, the mum can't come and sit with them on day one. Well, the mum's not asking to come and sit with them on day one. And I'm sure the applicant really would not want the mum to come and sit with them on day one. No. So we can make that clear that this is a job for the son and nobody else, and they'd need to come in and they need to be based in an office 3 days a week, and this is what it would look like, etc., etc., etc. Or they can be based from home, but here's the criteria. So already you're just building out some criteria around what you can and can't do. Now, often when we build job adverts, job specifications, job descriptions, we may build some of this out. The HR team may have built out some of the skills required. For example, some of these things may already have been put in place. These are just the unknowns. They knew. We didn't think about them when we sat down and built out all of these concepts and skills maps and all the other stuff. We didn't think about it. But that doesn't mean we can't think about it now, right? And what I would say to leaders is, like, get better at looking for where some of those blockers are early on. And this comes back to plan today for what may happen tomorrow. So that you can start to think about some of the worst case scenarios, but in reality, not think about why those worst case scenarios will stop you doing what you're doing. Think about what you can do should some of those worst case scenarios happen, right? So I can, I don't want to go to this big party, there's going to be too many people. I'm scared. I'm not going to know anybody. Rather than just thinking, I can go, but I might need to take a friend. Or I can go, but I might need to ring and check if there's a quiet space I can go if it's all a bit too overwhelming. I can go, but I'm just going to go for an hour. I'm going to book a taxi. This is just a normal thing in life that we do. We need to think about this in a business context, and we can do that with the biggest challenges right down to the micro challenges that exist within our everyday life within organizations. And this then ensures that we start to create the teams, the environments that are much less fearful of some of these changes, and much more focused around the can, right? What we can do. And then that becomes much more accommodating of those individuals that we may be fearful of because they may be in a wheelchair and we're worried about how we're going to support and accommodate them. Or they may have neurological differences, like a young person in my village who was non-verbal. And the team, they did a TV campaign on it. The team were saying, how are we going to work with this person? We don't know how we're going to work with this. They can't speak. And by the end of the process, they were like, this is the best person we've ever had working in the team. We found ways to communicate. We had these cards. In generally, this person didn't need to communicate too much. They smiled, they enjoyed, but they just wanted to get on with their job. I mean, what a great thing to have somebody in the team who you always know is like 99.9% on the job. Like, and they're happy with that. Like, why get frustrated and go, oh, that person, they have to communicate with us. They have to talk with us. They have to come and have lunch with us. No, like, that person is living their life in that team. We just need to accept that difference. We need to accept that. It doesn't mean we can't go for drinks and that person doesn't want to come and ask problem. It doesn't mean we can't all talk. It doesn't mean we can't, exist together with those nuances. And I think we need to unpick why that team's uncomfortable, why they're feeling the challenges, and whether some of those are reasonable or whether some of those are unreasonable. And what I think we'll find is quite a few of them are just unreasonable and they just need to be worked with, coached, developed, and then they can move on from some of those challenges.
It's very much down to beliefs that has been installed throughout. But you brought a point that we need more listeners. in this world, right? And you get an interesting example here. But do final wrap up to you, something practical really for any organization leaders that's right now thinking two things. Either they're thinking of, I want to perform and push the boundaries, therefore I need to make reasonable adjustments, um, and therefore I want to also or bring or start purposefully, intentionally hire neurodiverse talent. What are the three absolute musts they must do? As what are the first three steps that you recommend if they're at the beginning of that journey of really understanding first what who is neurodiverse in their talent, but also they're also interested and keen to hire more neurodiverse talent because of the very reasons you've just said. They're convinced they want to embrace it and create more shareholder value, and they see that as a way forward. How do they start?
Yeah. So I think, like any project, you need to think about where the greatest levels of potential impact are. And that may be because you are already experiencing some challenges. So it might be that you're already getting feedback from HR that there are some problems, and that may be an area of focus. But that shouldn't be the single area of focus. You may look at the recruitment process and think that there are certain areas that definitely need to be adapted and changed. You may have insights already through HR data analysis to say that disproportionately, for example, you're missing out on a key demographic within your area. Now, if you're already missing on a key demographic, that may be gender, ethnicity, for example, within a city that you exist in that is highly diverse and multicultural. If you're already missing on that, you are absolutely going to be having challenges around neuro inclusion. And so when you've taken a little bit of time, either through external support or through a working group within the organization, to kind of identify some of those areas, you were able then to think about, okay, what process are we going to follow
Okay,
to be
so
able
step
to?
step one is due diligence. You do like a
Yes,
assessment. So step one is assess the as you pointed out, the areas that are most problematic or the areas we want to grow exceptionally. To analyze, assess what are we struggling, and what we want to be really improve and get better at.
brilliant. Exactly, Marian. So first step is do due diligence, assess, audit systems, processes,
Okay.
potential areas of impact, right? And you can do that either in a small way or a big way, right? Dependent. And you can look at
Yeah.
one single area or across the whole
Do
employee life cycle.
Do you do it internally or externally? What would you recommend? If
So
how is
work that
that
we
done?
did with an organization, we looked both internally and externally. So we looked at the systems, the processes, the communications, internal, external. We looked at documents, key documents. So we helped them analyze all of that information, and then present them where the barriers were. But we also did external benchmarking to do competitor analysis, so they could also look at how they measured up against their competitors, not just in terms of neurodiversity and neuro inclusion, but more broadly, so that they could understand how far they
Okay.
were away, and then how potentially they could make strides through adaptations through neuro inclusion. So that was a really big piece of work. But through that particular work, it allowed them to look at the next 3 to 5 year strategy around neuro inclusion. And because of the data and insights that came out of the survey that we also did alongside that of their workforce, alongside that with interviews and assessment, they were able to understand, which is number two, Marian, their
Yep.
people, right? So number one, data insights, audits. Two, your people. And you may extract some of that from number one, but then what you can do is further engage with your workforce and people
Mm.
in that second
Okay.
stage, number two, based on some of the insights you've got from number one. The
Okay.
reason why you want to engage your current workforce is because they will already be facing barriers. They may feel unheard, unhelped. They may be facing challenges outside in terms of their family, their network, their community. So by engaging your people in this process, you get them on board, but also you will get unique insights and
Yeah.
energy into driving this work forwards. And you can decide exactly when you start with that. You might want to build out some of those insights so that you bring something to the table first. Then you're through an employee resource group or an enhanced employee resource group, taking it to the next stage of development. You can really start to engage your workforce in meaningful
Okay.
conversations. And it's okay to say, this is the beginning. We absolutely do not know enough about this. And that is why we're now starting on this journey. I guarantee you, dependent on how engaged your workforce is on other topics, they will be very interested in this topic. You may want to be
Mm.
hyper cautious if you recognize that there's a very limited take up from your workforce. That may show you already have additional significant challenges in terms of how safe your workforce feel psychologically within that workspace. There may
Mm.
be a little bit more work you need to do in terms of supporting your workforce to feel that they're in that safe space that they can start to have some of those conversations.
Okay.
And number three is
So just to summarize, number
yes,
two is basically engage your workforce, get obviously through employee resource group. So you really create this kind of commitment to work with them and engage really the people to drive this.
absolutely. And then three is you can go a bit deeper on external insights, customers, and thinking about the next phase of adaptations and what have you. The reason why I mentioned about customers is because Virgin Media, quite a few years ago, realised through poor interview practices they were losing millions and millions and millions of pounds in customers.
Hmm.
Potential customers were coming in, interviewing, getting a rubbish experience, and then they were going and switching their Virgin Media TV off. They were
Oh.
losing millions. So what did they do with that? They employed organisations to support them to transform their recruitment processes and their interview process, not just to be all right, but actually to be incredible. They made them so that people went away and went, wow, I've never had a recruitment experience like that, an interview experience like that. That was really good. And they did it through building a specialized recruitment process out for an executive role, first of all, which is interesting, and putting them through an incredible immersive experience. So my point here is coming back to some of the shareholder points and value, increased profitability, you have customers. Your customers are neurodivergent. They already feel underrepresented, undervalued, undersupported, right? They already see loads of horrible news and PR out there. What if you, as an organization, go, well, we're going to not just think this from an employee perspective, but we're going to think this from a customer and supplier perspective. And then you're literally thinking about the business and neuro inclusion from all angles. You think about the suppliers, you can put pressure, positive pressure on your suppliers to ensure what are they doing around neuro inclusion. You can build that into your buying processes from procurement's perspective to say, actually, this has become really important that any future purchases of technology, of innovation, of services consider or have considered neuro inclusion or neurodiversity as part of the work that they do. Now, as an organisation, you have significant power then on not just your environment, your people, your systems and processes, but actually influencing the world of work and communities more broadly. That is when I speak with organisations about putting yourself out there as an innovator in this space. So not only
Hmm.
you do what Virgin did there is you go from being an organisation that's doing nothing to fairly quickly becoming an innovator in the space because you double down on it in a period of time where most CEOs are still scared of the concept and the idea of
Hmm.
taking action. So, final point is you really take action and you double down on becoming an innovator in the space.
And that's very interesting because you're saying, I don't know what percentage of your customers will be also neurodiverse. So that could actually have direct impact on your sales and revenue and profitability ultimately. So that is an interesting angle, which many CEOs probably haven't thought about. Theo, this has been incredibly helpful. Thank you for sharing those insights, and for the audience. I'm sure there will be probably many other questions people may have. If anybody is interested to really get some additional insights, especially from businesses or any really people that struggle, what is the best way to reach you, and where to find you?
Yeah, you can find my website, neurodiversityworld.com. You can contact me via LinkedIn. You can definitely catch me there, and request for services, or just pop me a message if you want to talk. I'm quite prolific and prominent across LinkedIn and some of the other social media channels. So by all means, reach out to me there, and I guess you can pop a link in the copy of this content when it goes out with my details.
Amazing. Theo, thank you so much for the work you do, and for the real love and care you have for people and humanity. And thank you for being a leader who care. And oh, yes, neurodiversity at work. Okay. Where can we buy the book?
Amazon, also from the Publishers Kogan page if you want a better quality of book, and from most other distribution companies globally. It's all over the place these days, and being translated into a few languages as well.
I know you're writing a second book as well. What's can you tell us what the second book will be about? So we kind of
Yeah,
look forward to it.
I'm currently writing my second book with Professor Amanda Kirby, because I couldn't imagine writing a book with anybody else on this topic. The book is effectively neurodiversity for parents. There's often
Wow,
a focus on children, there's a focus on all different things, but actually, neurodiversity for parents, almost the A to Z on the topic,
amazing.
because Professor Amanda Kirby and myself have real lived experience, and we recognize the significant challenges globally for parents on this topic, and we want to help.
Theo, thank you so much, and blessings to you, your work, and your family. And thank you for sharing the time today.
Real pleasure. Thank you.